Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted.
Dan.
I am your host, ObjectivelyDan.
Dan.
This is the call-in show where we do live call-ins every Friday night at 7 p.m. Central Time, where we talk about what you believe and why.
Dan.
I am your host. Dan,
what are you doing?
Yes, that's my name. What's up? What's up, Jenna?
If you really want the truth, this is the Atheist Experience. So you think that you tell us how to live our lives, never questioning the source from which your moral code derives. You think that suffering is part of some great plan that's been devised. I wonder, what will it take for you to start opening your eyes? I wonder. Hi, everybody. Thank you for watching The Atheist Experience. I am Jenna Belk, and this is season 23, episode 46 on November 3rd, 2019. This is a show put on by the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of positive atheist culture and the separation of religion from government. So this is Dan.
Hi, I am ObjectivelyDan. I am the host of Truth Wanted, which is another production here at the Atheist Community of Austin, done on Friday night at 7. We go a little bit more out there than AXB calls. We talk a lot about, we've had some flat earth calls recently. We talked about Bigfoot, but we talk about religion and all that good stuff too. So if you haven't checked out my show, go check it out. It is called Truth Wanted. You can look that up on YouTube as well. But I am guesting today, so the hands are off the phone for me. This is all Jenna's show today. Matt is out of town and he doesn't know what he's missing. So this is you, all you today.
It's all me now. So let's see how this goes. We're just gonna go straight to calls and see what happens. Okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go with. Let's see. How do I answer? Kenny in Oklahoma. Kenny, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi there. How are you?
Pretty good.
It says here that being religious requires extraordinary evidence, and this seems to be confusing to you. Is that correct?
Well, no, it's not confusing to me. I didn't say that Christianity. This is a total misstatement on my phone call. My phone call is it seems like being religious and spiritual is pretty ordinary, since the vast majority of the people in the world are spiritual and religious. And since the vast majority of the people are spiritual and religious, that makes it ordinary. So
does that make it?
Why do I have to give extraordinary evidence of any spiritual religious beliefs I have if being religious and spiritual in the first place is ordinary?
So do you think that the number of people that believe something has any impact on whether or not it's true?
I'm not a bandwagon argument fan. I wouldn't make that fallacy, and I'm not making it now.
I'm just asking you a question.
Ordinary does depend on whether or not a lot of people believe in it.
Okay, so but what I'm saying is that I think that claiming that there's a God is an extraordinary claim, regardless of how many people believe it. So I'm not even going to bring that into the discussion. I'm not going to talk about whether it's ordinary or normal or anything like that. What I want to know is what's true, and I do think that that is an extraordinary claim, that there is some kind of deity or God or something out there, because there's no evidence for it, regardless of how many people believe it.
So you don't believe that it's bearing on this subject at all to... Are you still talking? I'm sorry. Oh, I'm seeing. I'm watching a delay. Pardon me.
Oh, it's okay.
I've got your sound turned off because I knew there was a little bit of delay. I didn't realize there was that big of a delay between Texas.
It's okay. I'll try to be patient.
Okay. Well, when we look at the leading monotheistic religions, we look at just one of them, Christianity. Christianity seems to have the majority of religious people in the world adhering to it.
Okay.
And
but we just talked about this, though, and we just talked about.
Hold on. Believe in a monotheistic.
Hold on 1 second.
Religion.
Hold on. I'm sorry. We just talked about the illegitimacy of the number of people that believe something, and we're not talking about whether something is ordinary, right?
Well, why did you want to shift the discussion?
Why do I want to? Because I want to know why you think that it matters that something is ordinary when I think that it matters that something is... Do you think that it matters that something is true? Or do you think it matters
what's
what's
whether
ordinary?
Or not God exists from the standpoint, and you open this whole conversation on discussing Christianity, which wasn't my call, but if you consider Christianity, and I'm just adding that to the equation here, that what we're looking at here is that ordinarily people as Christians are very satisfied that they have a reason for believing in what they believe in, even though it may be subjective to them and not objective to you or objective to Dan, who's objectively Dan. So some people don't really care if other people agree with them or not, and some people are just American and believe everybody's on their own spiritual journey or lack of one and can do whatever they want to. Mm-hmm. I just called in to wonder why it's considered by the atheist community. I mean, every time I watch this show, it sounds like you guys believe that it's extraordinary to be religious or spiritual.
Sure.
And in general, and I don't see anything extraordinary about that.
So
when it's ordinary for people to be that way, and it even seems like people are wired to be spiritual and religious. That it's our brain's wired that way, and that the people that aren't that way are actually doing something kind of extraordinary.
Yeah, and so, Kenny, this quote that you're talking about here, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, it's often attributed to the scientist Carl Sagan, right? And Carl Sagan's real scope with saying this was, I could say that the Earth, the reason why we have earthquakes is because there's goblins in the sky that bang hammers down on the earth and make earthquakes happen, and that would be an extraordinary claim, right? That's an explanation for the events that we see around us. And again, tectonic plates being the explanation for why earthquakes happen, that's still an extraordinary claim, and we do have enough evidence to support the explanation for this belief. And so what Carl Sagan is kind of pointing out with this is to say that the entire universe was created by a single deity, thousands of years ago, millions of years ago, whatever you want to go, that's still an extraordinary claim. That's still an explanation for events that has to compete with other kinds of explanations. And until we find enough evidence for that particular explanation over others, then we have to find, ones that match that of the claim, right, which we would consider extraordinary.
Do you see? So is your question why it seems
tie in the inflation of the universe with the existence of a Judeo-Christian God? Would that be evidence that God might exist?
Well, so if your specific claim was God used the inflation of the universe as part of his creation structure, then maybe yes, but we would still have to establish the existence of a God first, right? Because
if I attributed some sort of thing or energy or something that has the characteristics of God to that, and the consensus of astrophysicists was that this exists and fits the standard model of the Big Bang or whatever, wouldn't that be very strong?
Maybe so, but does Christianity itself actually support the inflation of the universe? I mean, really think about this. The inflation of the universe is what you're talking about. But this is a modern idea, right? Christians were not talking about this until scientists actually observed it itself, right? So we can almost, this is almost a retroactive kind of deal that we're talking about here. So you can fit a lot of these explanations into a Christian model, but you have to have it with the conceit that Christianity did not come up with this, right?
I would have to say that in 17 different instances of the Hebrew Old Testament, the verb for stretching, as in stretching out the heavens like a curtain, is pretty explicit as a process that had a time that began in the past and continues on or can continue on. Therefore, if God stretches out the heavens and dark energy is the culprit behind that and is necessary to be invoked by astrophysicists, and yet it seems to have a similar nature to God being invisible, indetectable, something you can't see.
But does that mean that it does? If it seems like it has a connection to a God, does that mean that it does?
Well, does it mean that dark energy does inflate the universe? Even in science, we can't even establish that, as far as I know.
Yes, and when we do establish a dark energy, are we going to have to attribute that to the Bible as well? You see, because
you establish a dark energy by detecting it.
Well, yes, but you might, the point with this is
becomes a physical phenomenon we can detect and analyze.
When the ancient Jewish rabbis were writing the Talmud and we're looking at these texts, I don't think they were talking about these advanced cosmological concepts that we're talking about now. I think we're retrofitting some modern scientific ideas onto an ancient text.
Okay.
I don't even think that the cosmological model that they had of the Earth and the universe was even compatible to what we have today. So, yeah.
I don't believe in coincidences in science, and I don't think any scientist does. The fact that this is compatible with Scripture is really the only thing anyone who believes and wants to be scientific and rational with their faith at all has to do. It's just find a common denominator that fits. Or you can say that since Japanese physicists have converted information into energy, you could say, well, maybe the Logos could be the forerunner of the Big Bang, the Logos, the pre-existent Christ, which would be a great deal of the right quality of information if he contains all the information of creation in him, which what Christianity has always taught, that the Father actually created through the Son. And so I don't really see any problems here for Christianity. It seems like Christianity is very compatible, very reasonable, and goes along.
If we're talking strictly about the Bible also talks about giants, ghosts. I mean, it talks about all kinds of other things here. Resurrections, angels. I mean, if we're just looking at minute ancient Hebrew words and picking out, this word expansion is kind of like the inflation that we see now with the universe. I mean, yeah, we could do this all day, but, there's lots of other broad concepts that just wouldn't even be touched by science today.
We can talk about angels a little bit if you'd like to, since...
I don't want to... Hold on. I don't want to go in this...
I could give you evidence that angels exist.
Kenny?
That
Kenny?
might be impossible.
Kenny? I don't want to go down, just going down this rabbit hole, that rabbit hole. I want to know... It says that you don't think that it's an extraordinary claim. Is that correct? That a God exists. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I don't believe it's an extraordinary claim to claim that God exists, a monotheistic God exists at all, considering the vast majority of religious people in the world are monotheists.
So
they claim they know God exists.
So I guess this kind of comes down to how we define extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be a bit of a subjective word.
So going with your perspective, if we're hold on, I'm talking, Kenny. Kenny. If we're defining extraordinary as something other than what a certain number of people believe, the opposite of what a certain number of people believe, then maybe we can say that using that definition, it's not extraordinary. But when we're saying that, do you think that God is like supernatural or anything outside of nature or anything outside of what we have tactile, proof for? Do you think that there's that's what your God is? Do you think it's outside of our? I'm sorry.
Do you believe that when a tsunami hits a beach and wipes out a bunch of people, that it's right to call it an act of God?
I don't know why you would make that connection to a God.
Well, often it's called an act of God, just like tornadoes are called an act of God.
I mean, I could call it an act of fairies, but why would I have any reason to say that?
Well, because that's common. It's ordinary.
So just because a lot of people think that, does that have any bearing on whether or not it's actually true?
Whether or not God did something is mainly viewed as extraordinary or supernatural is because man isn't the one that has power over it or can control it.
It's called extraordinary because this God has abilities. Hold on. I'm trying to see if I'm following you, Kenny. Can you listen to me and tell me if I'm following you correctly?
Okay.
I'm sorry. I do that. I repeat things and kind of think about it as I'm saying it, trying to see if I'm following along. So just because your claim is that a God can do things outside of the abilities of man, that's what makes it. So do you agree that it's extraordinary then, if that's how you're defining it?
Most people look at the fact that something's extraordinary is that it's outside of the conception of man on how to do it, or that man can do it or has the power to do it. That's when I look at something extraordinary, it's extraordinary in my own conception of how that can be done. You can't explain how it happens.
So then do you agree?
How God is doing any miracle if we don't know how the miracle's done in the first place.
But so then, using that definition of ordinary, which is different from the first one, do you
that's
think...
the definition of not knowing. That's the definition of having an agnostic knowledge of miracles.
That's the definition of having agnostic knowledge of miracles. I don't know what that means.
You can't necessarily know how God did a miracle.
Then why do you know that God did miracles? If you don't know how and you can't...
Miracles are events, and if events happen, it's a historical problem.
But how do you know that any God has anything to do with anything outside of the abilities of man?
Well, if he's appealed to, and then the answer to that appeal seems to be that event, then that's a direct connection that maybe
Why do you think that that's an answer? Why an event is an answer for something?
Well, I don't believe an event is an answer. I believe that when you invoke a actor, an agent, and then there's an event that
invoke an actor or agent. What does that mean?
Every day, commonly in life.
Hold on. What does it mean to invoke an agent?
Well, when I say invoke, when I state that I ask an agent to do something, and then the agent does, then something occurs exactly the way I asked for it to occur.
So if I ask,
that gives indication maybe that agent was involved, and that at least gives me data in that direction, and I have evidence in that direction. I don't have evidence that another agent did it because I never asked anybody else to do it.
So if I am leaving here after this show and I ask the God of the fairies to get me home safely, and then I get home safely, is that any evidence that a God of fairies exists?
No, because because you're talking about something very ordinary. Getting home safely happens more often than not.
Okay, it's not very common that I leave this show. That I'm leaving.
It's very common for you guys to be so naive.
Okay, now if we're going to start name calling and insulting each other, we're not going to get very far. I'm sincerely trying to understand you.
I've been on this show.
I'm sorry?
I've been insulted every time I've been on the show by Matt Dillahunty.
Well, I'm not Matt Dillahunty.
Woo! I'm not Matt either. I got too much hair to be Matt.
I haven't insulted you yet, so I'd expect the same respect.
Myself, okay.
Okay, so let's not do that. I just want to figure out why you don't think that it's fairies, you think it's a god.
Well, if I ask God to do it and it happens, then why should I believe it's fairies?
What?
I think we're missing each other a little bit.
My point is that it's who you ask. Let me give you an example.
Hold on. I want to stick with this because I don't actually think that fairies are the reason that I get home. I don't actually pray to fairies.
Why would anyone attribute it to that?
Because I like fairies.
Oh, you like fairies?
Yeah, okay. I like fairies. So that's why I'm using that as an example, because I could say that because fairies make me feel good, that is, that I believe in them and that I think that they're there and I pray to them and they get me home every time I ask them to get me home. So if I wanted to believe that, I could probably convince myself of that. But what I'm asking you is, does that have any bearing on whether or not the fairies are getting me home? And does that mean that I should believe that the fairies are what's getting me home versus me getting me home? Right? So I could use that with a god. How do you know that it's a god? How would I know if it's fairies? Does that make sense why I'm using that?
You would have to have a quality of energy or action that occurred there that could only be attributed to fairies.
Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
No, well, he's got a point though. So
what does that mean?
If do we have that same quality of evidence in respect to the Christian God?
Quality of evidence.
Sure,
I think we do. Christ holds all things together, and dark matter is a lot like God in nature, so maybe Christ does hold all things.
If you say, but that's a claim, right? Christ holds all things together.
A claim that all things are being held together by gravity and that the major culprit of that is dark matter?
But we're not saying that because gravity a god.
Well, that is a claim, and it's a claim that can be supported by evidence, right? So if we could...
Absolutely. It's every reputable astrophysicist.
So what is the evidence of the claim that Christ holds all things together?
Well, the revelation that he does.
Well, okay.
Wait,
well, I don't.
That's not evidence.
when you speak of God, well, I wouldn't say that revelation isn't evidence. It's evidence if it's stated, then it's later determined to be true.
We haven't determined it to be true in the first place, though.
Really
you see, this is a bit circular. Right, so we figured out that, okay, so your understanding of dark energy is that gravity holds things together. I'm asking you, how do we know that Christ holds all things together? And your response to me was revelation, that he does.
That's part of it.
Okay, what's the other part?
It always has to be the revelation of Scripture if I'm going to tie it directly in.
So let me ask you this then. If we did not have Scripture, let's say the Bible was not accessible to you or me, would we still be able to determine that Christ holds all things together?
Yeah, because Christian traditions existed before the canon.
Let's say Christian traditions are out the window. What else do we got?
Oh, well, I have absolutely no intention of talking about reality at all without the Christian religion.
Okay, so
hold on.
But you understand, Kenny, that your understanding of reality of how things work is based on the word of mouth of people and not observations of nature by themselves.
No,
it's always going to be somebody's written word or somebody's spoken word to you. It's never going to be something that you can access yourself, right?
I mean, we could use any religion. We could use the Muslim religion.
All scriptural revelation is, in the first place, is a record of God's action to man. It's more of a record than it is the actual revelation itself. The revelation itself is what God does.
So let's say if that record doesn't exist, like Dan says, do we have anything to go off of that has to do with reality and like right now?
Sure.
Other than what happened thousands of years ago?
Yeah.
Okay, what do we have?
There's things in astronomy and astrophysics that we can look at that points to God, and these things just happen to also be mentioned in Scripture itself.
No. If we don't have Scripture, you're talking about astronomy. What in astronomy points us to a God?
Well, the fact that you've got something that in nature is very similar to God.
Well, wait.
Well,
hold on. I want you to listen to what you just said. I asked you what in astronomy proves to us that there's a God. And you said there are things that are like a God, and that doesn't tell me anything about the God. Yeah, it does.
It's like the God that I'm talking about. He's immaterial, he's spirit, and he's the source of all things.
So you're making more claims as evidence. Do you realize that?
Making more claims as evidence when I make an analogy between dark energy and the action of God.
When I ask you what in astronomy proves to us that there is a God, that is me asking you for evidence. So you saying that, what did he say?
Well, so really what we're going down to is we're pointing back to look at these qualities and descriptions that people have historically looked at God and have claimed to be of God. And look at these observations I make now. They are similar to the ones that these people make. You know, that's kind of what I'm hearing. And like, yes, well, we could absolutely do the same thing to Jenna's point with all kinds of other things, right? We could take another book from another religion and say, look at the thunder, look at the way that, you know, the weather systems work. This is obviously related to this tradition that I have here that people have been talking about for thousands of years. And yes, we can make these kinds of comparisons all day, but it's not as strong as us making the observations ourselves and determining what's true based on the observation alone. Going back to my, analogy with earthquakes, if I said, the earthquakes on Earth match up exactly what it says in the textbook, and that's how I know it's true, because this geology textbook is telling me what's true. Well, I could still make those observations without the textbook. In theory, I could just rewrite the whole textbook myself based on the observations.
And create new traditions and new ideas.
Yeah, and so we have to be able to look at stuff outside of this reference to Scripture, because if we can't make observations outside of the reference of Scripture in determinants of God, then how can we ever be sure? How can we ever be sure that what we're looking at isn't just the traditions of man, that this isn't something that people made up, that's something that people said?
Did you ever go to university and study Greek philosophy by any chance?
Sure.
Okay. Do you realize that the Greeks didn't have an answer for ultimate anything, existence or anything else?
Yeah, I don't know what the hell that has to do with anything, but yeah.
That's why they have started appealing to oracles and gods to begin with.
Sure.
So are we changing the subject?
Well, let's let Kenny finish what he's saying.
Had to give them objectivity. I wish I could finish the statement. They had to have something from outside themselves give them objective reality.
Yes.
Ultimate reality doesn't come from an unultimate individual. You and I are not ultimate. We're not universal. We're not big enough.
No, I'm hearing more claims, and I'm not hearing anything about evidence. And I'm going to ask you, I'm sorry. We're going to dial this back and figure out if you have any evidence, because making more claims does not equal evidence.
Well, I think it's an arbitrary. I think you're applying evidence in such a general, arbitrary way that I'm not sure anybody can satisfy you. But you might want to define what you mean by evidence.
Okay.
I can tell you what the necessary evidence would be for whether or not the resurrection occurs, whether or not there's documentation from 2,000 years ago that it happened. That's the only way a historian can approach it, with primary source evidence, which would be the four Gospels. And the reason they stand out is that they're the only record of any of this that's compatible with the background geography and times, along with the actual frequency of Jewish male and female names back then. Simon's the most popular name of that period for those people in that world. It just happens to be the most popular name among the disciples.
I don't know what you're getting at.
You're looking at all this other stuff. There's not a way in the world that the information in the Gospels, whether an eyewitness wrote them or not, there's not a way in the world they could have come up with all this when subject to a control group of the Gnostic Gospels and others, unless the information came from eyewitnesses. There's too much accuracy at the times, and there's too many errors in the Gnostic Gospels.
I totally disagree with you, but I think we spent a lot of time on this call here, and we do have a full set of calls. I think we should probably move on in just a little bit here. Yeah. You have control of the phone today. But Kenny, thanks again for calling into the show today.
Well, I enjoyed it. It was very stimulating.
Good.
Cool. Keep thinking. Keep trying to come up with evidence. Hold on. I do want to tell you what I mean by evidence, though.
Go for it.
Okay, go right ahead.
So if I want proof that anything exists, first thing I can do is I can look for it, right? So what would you equate? I'm going to have to probably think about this.
Okay.
Can you call back next time I'm on? Actually, I want to think about this and try to come up with more of a concrete definition of evidence for you. Is that okay?
Okay, well, that would be nice. But I think I kind of narrowed it down that you have to find something that, for it to be evidence that God exists, it would have to be somewhat like him and be pretty well qualified to be limited to his scope and his nature. And I think dark energy and dark matter are pretty good candidates for that. But, they're really big, and God's really big. And so I think that when you got an invisible, immaterial, undetectable thing out there that's doing something that Scripture actually says occurs, that kind of blows my mind. That's not evidence for God.
I agree.
Yeah. Well,
okay,
again, something to explore
we'll chat
another
later,
time.
Kenny. Thank you so much for calling, and
fine.
thank you for being civil. I really appreciate it.
Yep. Have a good day. Yeah. So a couple different things there to look at. So, namely, the one thing at the end there is he's describing the immaterial, intangible God that we somehow have tangible physical evidence for, which is really interesting, right? If we're talking about, if we really are saying that these are the qualities of God, somehow he can be both, and that doesn't really...
But I don't know why we would do that.
Yeah, but, my big thing with this conversation is, look, we're looking at claims of a God. Like, I heard a lot of claims about what God was, and, we're talking about what kind of observations we can make to fit those previous claims, and we're having to kind of, skew what we already know based on, modern evidence, based on modern understandings of the world, and putting it into these old traditions of God that don't really jive well, in my opinion, especially if we look at the historical record of what Christians have historically believed and kind of, how we've kind of turned science into, evidence for religious understanding. It doesn't really make sense to me. It doesn't actually add up if you really look at it.
Yeah, it just seems to me like anytime we ask what evidence is there, then they just come up with another quote or claim about, well, that's what God is. And it's like, but I don't have any reason to believe that. So if I wanted to know if you existed, I can look
you
for
can
you,
ask me.
I can call you, there's several things that I can ask your friends.
Yeah, so I have a joke on my show that if the Christian God is real, he is welcome to call into my show at Truth Wanted at 7 p.m. Central Time. Go check it out.
If he can literally,
But
if it's the Christian
7
God,
p.m. on Fridays.
if that God can literally do anything, be everywhere, all that, then I don't know why I have no evidence.
Now, that's not to say that he is able and maybe just chooses not to, and that's something that if I was an apologist, I'd probably bring up.
If he chooses not to let me believe that he exists, then that's his decision.
That's true.
Okay, we're going to go on. Let's do... Ooh, Connor sounds interesting. Ooh, crap, I just dropped him. Connor, call back. I hit the wrong button.
Rookie mistake, Jenna.
Connor, call back. That was a rookie. I am a rookie. Okay, let's go with Chris.
You have, right there.
That one?
Mm-hmm, yep.
It says here, Chris, that you used to be a bad Christian, a cultist, and you don't know what made the world, but there had to be a creator. Is that correct?
Are you talking to me?
Yes,
I am.
sir.
Okay, good. Well, I wouldn't say I was ever an occultist.
Okay.
As far as...
Sorry about that.
I'm more... what I try to explain to the guy, I'm more in the neutral area. I did study the Bible for a very long time. At 13 years old, I was a churchgoer until my probably, mid-30s. It was actually studying the Bible for a lot of years that really turned me against the Christian faith. There's a lot of cruelty discussed in the Bible, and I'm not a cruel person by nature. But
Good for you.
what I did want to point out, and of course this ain't gonna be no type of, y'all said y'all want tangible evidence. Nobody's going to produce that. But what I do find interesting, to not only studying the Bible, but the Book of Enoch, a lot of ancient text talks about beings coming out of the sky. There's different accounts of these beings having a hand in creation of this planet. And if you study evolution, just to say it happened by accident without some type of guidance, that's where I draw a blank, because I'm like, I understand the theory to a degree. I ain't got no master's degree in biology or nothing like that, but I got a good handle on it. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
Sorry, I'm following along.
But I got a good handle on it, and I'm not saying that, evolution didn't happen. It very well could happen. There's a lot of things to support it did happen, but I guess where I'm coming from, who's to say that either an extraterrestrial force or a force outside of our knowledge, or what we can't test it, had a hand in the creation of this planet, this universe, or whatever. I mean, there's got to be something greater than us. I hope we ain't the best thing going.
So that's the thing. Sorry, why can't we just say there's something greater than us and it's the universe?
Well, see, that's the whole thing with me. I think there's, and like I said, this is a claim. It is going to be a claim, but to me it makes sense that they'd be a force that things we don't understand, because our knowledge is very limited as humankind. It's very limited. Mm-hmm. And we've not even reached the peak of our technology. I used to do telecommunication work. I understand, our technology pretty well, but we're still progressing, not only in technology, but knowledge and everything else. And I just think that, there's got to be, and I think there's a highly probable chance there's something greater than us.
Maybe.
Well, Chris, first off, I want to commend you, on your humbleness, and because you're saying that you don't specifically know, but you're saying that this is like, just based on what we're seeing is kind of amazing, and, I want as much of an explanation as anybody else. What Jenna and I are more against is really the people who say, I know specifically what this is, and let me tell you why, because if you fit this in here and this in here, then this is the explanation for the universe, and that's something that we're generally against. You mentioned creation, and then you mentioned evolution. One, I want to point out that those are really two different things, right? The observations that we see of genetic changes, animals in an environment changing over time, plants in an environment changing over time, we can pretty much say that is ultimately true. Whether or not there's a guiding force or some sort of created force that's, guiding the process, that's kind of a separate question. But I think you would agree with me that we can at least observe these changes to be true. There's very few people that would even deny that much. But even so, for us, I think Jenna and I would be happy to find any kind of explanation to see what created us, where we're coming from, what's the plan. But we haven't seen enough evidence to convince us of one claim versus another one, because we're talking about big deal things here. And it's going to take a little bit more than just a book someone that wrote about that we can make some connections to say, well, this must be the best thing. And I also like that you have to say that nobody can really provide evidence for this kind of stuff, which I mean, I agree. I haven't seen it yet either. I'm not saying that it couldn't happen, but, we have some reason to doubt just based on what we've seen here on this show and other shows like it.
I'm just curious what God you believe in now.
Well, I'm not. That's a tough question for me, because I'm not opposed to the God that Christians claim to believe in, but what I'm opposed to is the way they not only present their belief system, because studying it. Just to give you an example, if you go back to the first century Christian and then go to modern day times, you're going to have a vast world of difference in just the belief.
Yep.
And there is a lot of books in the Bible that did not exist originally. They can't find it. They don't know this. There's been a lot of stuff added in the Bible. There's a lot of translation barriers in the Bible. This does exist.
Yeah.
But so I believe, yes, I do believe there's a higher power of some sort. I do believe in a spirit, so to speak. Now,
so can I stop you there real quick? I want to ask you some questions about the spirit, if that's okay with you, unless you have a point you're trying to make. I'm so sorry.
No. Go ahead.
So you believe there's a higher power or a spirit. Does it do anything? Does it say anything? Does it provide? What does it do? Can you try to answer that?
Well, if I believe like I have a spirit within me. Now, how you define that, as far as define that, like what to do for me, it goes back to I'll give you a good example of what I believe it is. Was like the electrical impulse in your brain. Upon death, that goes away.
Yep.
Okay. Could that electrical impulse in your brain, the electrical force inside your body, that does exist, and that is a scientifically proven fact, that exists.
Energy.
Could that be what is referred to as a spirit throughout, let's say, ancient religious belief systems?
Well,
as far as the spirit of, let's call it spirit of God. That's not exactly what I believe. We'll call it that.
Well, but are you saying that you have a spirit and there is a spirit that's a God, yet you're not the God? There's a separate spirit.
I have my own individual life force within me. Yes.
Spirit's kind of a separate concept.
Well, I just want to ask him real quick.
Yeah.
So you say that you believe that there is a spirit or higher power. And then you said that you believe that you have a spirit. So I'm wondering, what's the difference?
Okay, the spirit I have within me would be my own individual personal life force that's unique to me.
So why couldn't you be God?
Well, there's no, I hope not.
I'd like to go a little different direction, if that's okay with you.
No, go ahead, do what you want.
So, Chris, you're saying, like, you know, kind of what's commonly referred to as a soul, right, a spirit. You think that there's something that's in us, and you might attribute that to, like, an electrical impulse, is kind of what I'm hearing, that we all kind of had. My challenge to you is, you know, if I could put that same electrical impulse into another person, right, if I put that, would that mean that my soul goes into that person?
Oh, I mean, if you put it like that, yes. Now, I don't personally believe that.
See, I don't think so either. And here's why I think that.
Then why would you say yes?
Well, here's why I think that, Chris. Here's why I don't believe that, too. Because I think that we're made of a lot of different things, right? That electrical impulse you're talking about is just one of the many things that makes me. You've seen there's medical studies that show that, you know, if we get impacted at certain parts of the brain, then, like, you know, our personality changes. Maybe you know somebody who's been like that. And we know, like, Alzheimer's patients, for example, also change over time. And we can see because there's physical changes in the body that change our personality types, kind of change who we are. And I would say, well, if we can point to other physical aspects to who we are, and we can see that the physical components of us make us who we are, then why should I believe that there's a soul or something outside of what's physical to us?
Yeah. Okay. I'm getting messed up by a delay too. Let me turn this down a minute because I'm trying to listen to this and what? Okay. Yes, I understand what you're saying, and that's very valid. That's very valid. I understand that. And you're saying if you have brain damage, that you're not going to have the same functions as you've had prior to getting brain damage. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's an organ in your body that's been damaged.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with the actual electrical force that's in your body still existing there.
Because your impulse could happen.
You're right, because you're damaging an organ that controls your functions, controls your thought and everything else. So, of course, if you damage that, it's going to set you off. There's no doubt about it. But the force inside that body, as long as it's breathing, still exists inside that body.
Maybe. But if we take, I mean, so you're talking about a physical observational, like electrical force, right? Or are you talking about something?
I mean, it's been scientifically documented in studies of the brain and the body. I mean, they know it exists.
If we're talking about a physical force that we can observe, then wouldn't that mean that like what we are is also just physical in that sense too? It's not necessarily a spiritual thing, right? Because it is within the physical realm.
Well, yeah, scientifically, no, they're not going to identify as that.
Okay.
But I just find it awfully. See, it goes back to going back to ancient texts, not necessarily the Bible. See, a lot of ancient texts that talks about the spirit leaving the body. Okay. Well, upon your death, that electrical force ceases to exist within your body. Now, the next question may be, where does it go when you die? Well, see, that's where I'm going to say my personal belief is that you exist in an afterlife. That's my personal belief. Now,
okay. So that's a different.
I don't know. I'm not there yet.
That's a different thing. So I want to explore that a bit. What makes you so sure that there's an afterlife?
I'm not sure there's an afterlife. But
you say that's a belief that you have.
I don't close the possibility of that being there.
But you do believe there is.
I don't say, well, no, there's no way there is one. Well, I'm not there yet. I truly don't know. So I'm not going to say, yeah, you don't know, or you don't get saved. I don't believe that way. I don't believe you don't accept Christ, you're going to burn in hell for eternity. I don't necessarily claim that belief.
Gotcha. But I thought you just said you did believe there was an afterlife, though. Like it was a personal.
I personally do believe that.
So I want to explore that a little bit. Like, why are you personally convinced?
That would get to a topic that's probably deep. Okay, as a child, I did not believe in ghosts and paranormal things happening and stuff like that. I did not believe in these things. It was actually on two separate occasions, two incidents that happened to me that opened my eyes that, there's something to it. And I ain't talking about these shows on TV, all that stuff's hokey to me, but in reality, two things in my life that's happened to me that I cannot explain. I could not find a rational explanation for it. And I didn't know what else to call it. Now, true, I didn't know what else to call it, but until I find a rational explanation as to what I experienced, and it totally
What's that rational explanation?
Well, if I tried to find a rational explanation, that's the whole thing. I tried to say,
did you
what
find
is
one?
this? No.
Okay.
I didn't. And that goes
so
back
what does that
to say,
mean?
well, I didn't find one. Now I can.
So what does that mean when you don't find an explanation for something? What does that mean?
Well, it depends on circumstance. It ain't just, the picture fell off the wall, so it's automatically got to be a ghost. It could be a vibration. It could be somebody walking upstairs. I mean, there's 100,000 questions I would ask what made that picture fall off the wall.
Right.
But this is an actual visual sighting of what they call an apparition. Okay, like I said, I wasn't raised up believing this stuff. Ghost stories were just stories. That's all it was. But I saw this with my own two eyes. And I looked at it for longer than 5 seconds, totally sober. So I almost wrecked looking at it.
So my take is that if you don't find a rational explanation, then you don't know what happened, right?
Well, truly, I don't know what it is, but I don't know what else to call it because I've never witnessed it.
But that's the thing is if you don't know what happened, then you don't know what happened.
Well, true enough. I mean, that's fair because ultimately I don't know what happened.
Right. So I wouldn't say I don't know. Hold on. I wouldn't say I don't know what's in Dan's mug over there, so it must be Kool-Aid. No, I don't know. Right? And if there's no way I can look, I can't just come up with something and say that must be it because I don't know.
What would you do if I actually had Kool-Aid in this cup right now?
Hey, but would that mean that I have a rational reason to believe that?
No, but I'm just saying that'd be awesome.
Right, but
well, no, but
does that make sense?
If Dan's Kool-Aid or he had looked in his mug see Kool-Aid, you're not going to know. And it could have some vodka in it too. You don't know.
Right. So if
you look over there and you see Kool-Aid, you know it's Kool-Aid. But what I'm saying is, I saw what I saw. I saw what I saw with my own two eyes, stared at it for over 5 or 6 seconds, and I didn't automatically go there. It was 2 or 3 years later I realized, hey, that must have been what it was.
But it was 2 or 3 years later that you had this realization that must have been what it was, but you have no evidence. You have no reason to believe that.
Yes, I have.
Can you verify it? Can you repeat this process at all? And can you test it? Can you try to can it happen again?
Like I mean, how would you put that to a scientific test?
I don't know. I'd try to repeat whatever caused it to happen.
I mean, we want to think rational. I agree. You want to be rational about stuff, and yeah, when the opportunity calls for it, put it to the test when you don't know.
And then when you put it to the test, and then you find out that you don't know, well, then that's when you realize that you don't know.
Well, true enough, I guess. But what I witnessed was not something that I've seen since or before. And
Well, then that
it did
means that
happen
you don't
where a
know
girl
what
was brutally
happened.
beaten and burnt to death. I mean, that was another thing there that what happened is that a trailer burnt down. A girl was tied up, beat to death, and they set the trailer on fire with gasoline. And the spot in the trailer where she died, which would have been the bedroom, tied up in her bed, is where I saw this. We'll call it apparition, whatever it was I saw. And putting all that together, I find a lot of things are saying, hey, that's something.
But what does that? But does that mean that something is God, or is a spirit, or is
God.
something?
I do believe it was according to the people who are into the paranormal stuff, it was what they call an apparition. It was a spiritual force.
So why would we take the word of the people who do the paranormal stuff as truth?
Well, that's a fair enough question. Why would you take somebody who's but that's the only thing.
Well, can you try to think about and answer that for me? I know you're trying really hard, and I really appreciate how honest you're being about saying that you don't know, and so I really appreciate that.
That's my policy. Honesty is the policy, right?
Yeah, so can you try to think about an answer? When you say that you think that it must have been an apparition because those paranormal people said that it must have been, then why are we taking their word for it? Can you try to think about why we would do that?
That's the only label that I've ever been familiar with to call it. I don't have no other label for it. I don't have no other tag to put and say this is what this is. I can't create my own word for it.
But could you say that you don't know what happened?
Well, of course I'm going to say I don't truly know. I've done said I don't truly know.
So then why are we saying I don't know, therefore it must be an apparition?
That's the only thing of me trying to draw a conclusion, because what I saw was abnormal. It wasn't something you'll see on a normal basis.
Maybe.
It wasn't nothing that I've seen, like I said, before or since. But it was a very odd happening.
Yeah, a lot of odd things happen, don't they?
Well, of course, odd things happen.
Right.
But should we always say that it's of our perception of this world as we know it, or what we call normal everyday things?
I mean, maybe. If it's something that's happening and I'm walking down the street and I see something that's happening that shouldn't happen, do I have any reason to believe that there's something outside of this planet that's causing it to happen? Or should I say, oh, something happened that I don't understand?
Well, at that point in time, once you make a statement you don't understand, as I do, if there's something I don't understand, I try to research and study. I try to understand it.
Right, and you can try, and I appreciate that you did, and I appreciate that you also come down to the point that at the end of the day, you don't know what happened. My question is, when you realize and you can admit to yourself that you don't know what happened, why are we going that extra step to say that it must be an apparition?
Because I think it's human nature to...
Okay, that's fair.
In situations where you don't... Well, I admit it's human nature.
It is human nature to come up with answers for things that we do not have answers to. Is that right?
I think it's part of your psyche or your mind or your person to, as many people do. I'm the type of person, I want to know the answers. I want to know truth. I want to know facts.
Right. It sucks to say I don't know. It sucks.
Even if it goes against what I may believe.
Right.
If I'm showed otherwise, then I'll be open-minded to it, for sure.
Okay.
But
you know what?
2 years searching, what was this? You know what I'm saying?
Right. No, yeah, you're doing awesome. Thank you so much for calling, Chris. We got a couple more callers to get to, but I wanted to thank you for your honesty, and just keep thinking about it. And call back again and let us know what you come up with, okay?
Well, I'll sure call back again, but, I might want to do a different topic next time.
Sure thing. Try again.
Can I say something real quick, though? You're a lot more easier to look at than Matt. I just want to let you know that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah. I know you're talking about me there, but yeah, it's cool.
All right.
Yeah, he must have got us confused.
Yeah, no, he was being real honest, and I appreciate that.
So, spirit ideas of ghosts and stuff like that. I mean, that's pretty cross-cultural. That's pretty cross-religious.
A lot of people believe in ghosts.
And it is fascinating to be like, oh, why do we have a lot of these, kind of observations if there wasn't some truth to it? And it is contextual, right? Like some people are just tired and they think they see something, or the morning of. I remember I thought I saw my dog when my dog died when I was a little kid. I thought I saw him in the backyard for a second because I missed my dog. Like that's something that happens, and there's different kinds of explanations depending on the context of the belief. But Chris was saying, I mean, I think at the end of the day, he thought it was a ghost, but, he still wasn't sure. He was still open to other ideas. So that's something that's good to have. Like, always keeping an open mind for this kind of stuff.
Yeah. All right. So let's see.
Got a lot of different people here.
You know
I
what?
see Dean.
John's been waiting a while.
Okay, we can go to John. Go for
Let's
it.
go with John. John, can you hear us? You there?
Yes, I can.
Cool beans. It
hear
says
me?
here, yes, sir. It says here that theism used to be a job for you, kind of similar to a job. Is that right? Like you feel like you've lost your job now that you've lost your religion. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that is correct. By the way, Jenna, you're awesome. Dan, I'm going to look up Truth Wanted.
Hell
Gonna
yeah.
plug that for you too.
Thanks. Yeah.
But,
So, do you want to
yeah,
elaborate, or do you want me to just go right into responding?
Go ahead and respond.
Well, hold on. I want to know what John, you work.
Kind of interesting.
John, did you work in a church? Did you work in a clergy somewhere? What was your background?
No, I never worked there, but I was raised in that field, and now that I'm not using that anymore, it's kind of interesting. I like it.
You like it?
It's. I feel like I'm better off now that I don't go to church anymore.
Good. Yeah.
So why did you describe theism as a job? What's your explanation for that?
Well, I also think that other people do it.
I can relate. Yeah.
I feel like they put it as a job on themselves, and nobody likes their job.
Do you mean what do you mean as a job? Do you mean like in defense of the faith? Like, do you mean like the practice of going to church every week? Like, what about it makes it a job to you?
It's going through the motions, going and doing your thing and doing your deed, and then like you get paid by getting to go to heaven, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. There is like it is a quid pro quo kind of thing, right? It's like, hey, I'm going to do these things for this religion. I expect the community support. I expect
The donation.
If you're on that side of things, sure. But even just as a layperson, there is the expectation of having the ability to communicate with God, maybe even go to heaven, right? I mean, depending on your religious beliefs, there is something that you get out of it by doing the practice. So in that sense, I could see how it could easily be considered a job.
But I also see a lot of other people that use that as that crutch, and they just keep going through it.
Because it's comfortable. Because it's what they've always done.
It's comfortable for them.
Yeah, I can totally relate to
uncomfortable for
you.
me.
Can you tell me if your experience is similar to mine? I'm going to try to summarize it as short as I can, but tell me if this is kind of how you feel. Okay?
Oh, I definitely, yeah. It's okay.
So I used to feel like there was a list of things that I had to do, and regardless of whether I wanted to do them, and it took up so much of my time that when I lost that belief, then I lost that list of things to do and then came up with this huge empty page of time, and I can do whatever I want instead. Is that kind of how you feel? Is that what you're kind of getting at?
I feel like I was raised to a point that I lost a lot of time based upon what other people's expectations of me were.
You lost a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are you doing now?
Childhood almost,
Yeah.
Looking for a job, something to replace it with.
So what are you thinking do you think you have to replace it with something that's similar to religion, or are you looking kind of in the art field, or are you looking in where are you looking?
I feel like I don't need that job anymore.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I did. I ended up doing a call-in show at the Atheist Community of Austin, and that became kind of my job. But in all seriousness, note, there is kind of this emptiness feeling that you feel. There it is. For those of you watching on screen, really plugging the show today. I'm really enjoying it. I got to say, first of all, I'm not used to this many people in the audience for my show, by the way. It's a Sunday crowd. They're always, got more people here. But anyway, there is this sense of loss that you feel kind of and because you do go through the motions and stuff when you're a believer, at least for most people. And for me, I'm lucky because I got to find the Atheist Community of Austin, and I get to hang out here on the weekends and do my thing and stuff. But there's not everybody is so #blessed as I am to kind of have those things in their lives. I mean, most people that we talk to, I'd say on my show for sure, are people who live in isolated areas where most people don't think the way that they do. And so they turn to the internet for a community, or maybe they start their own small little groups there. And like, that's what a lot of people do. And so like when people come up with this criticism of us, of it's like, well, why do you guys feel the need to organize every week and like do all this stuff if you really don't believe? It's like, because we like, one, we kind of miss that part of it. But two, like we're still human beings. We still like to meet together in groups. We still find this stuff interesting.
Community.
Yeah, it's a community, and
a community thing isn't a religious thing.
Yeah,
it's
for
a
sure.
human thing.
And that's, I think, yes,
exactly.
People make that conceit.
I hope your viewers can recognize that too, even the theists.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And I wish more people understood that, because I even got somebody asked me the other week, like, well, why do you talk about this stuff if like, you know, you don't believe in anything? It's like, well, because like, at first, one, I believe in stuff. Company. Yeah, two, it's like, because it's interesting, it's cool, and I think, you know, we genuinely think other people think the way we should think too. Like, we want to be able to have these kinds of conversations. I mean, we're not just completely neutral on everything, right? Just because we lack a belief in something doesn't mean that we can't, you know, have other passions and interests. So, yeah, I can relate.
Would you mind if I ask one more question?
Go for it, John.
I've been dealing with, there's a lot of theists that I have in my life, and I'm wondering on how to deal with the mortality of them, because they believe in something and, you know, prayers and stuff like that, and I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know how to, when people get older, I'm getting older myself, and when people have like a certain type of thing that they're expecting, I don't know how to deal with it.
Are you concerned about how you're going to handle them leaving you, or are you concerned about how they're going to handle you leaving?
Great clarification there.
There's a little selfishness, yes. I'm concerned about having people leave my life, especially if they're in pain and suffering, you know.
So kind of both?
But what they believe that's going to happen afterwards is a little concerning to me, because they could do better in the process.
Well, you know,
in my opinion,
at the end of the day, you're not responsible for other people's beliefs. You know, I mean, like in some sense, if
I'm
you have
responsible for my own beliefs,
responsible for your own beliefs, and you're responsible for your own conversation with other people, and whether or not they're convinced of what you believe or what you don't believe is ultimately not up to you. And I think that's something that it's true. You know, I talk to people every week that don't believe in the same stuff that I do, and I wish that they did. But you know, the best I can do is have conversations, try to be friendly with people, try to be open about this kind of stuff, because I'd rather be having conversations about this stuff and maybe convincing them they're changing their mind than not having these conversations at all and not giving them the chance, right? Because a few years ago, if you know my story, a guy gave me a chance, had a conversation with me on 30 minutes, and look where I'm at today. You know, and it wasn't just because of one conversation. It was a lot of different things. But the point is, you know, if you isolate yourself and you don't talk about it with people, then that's a whole other problem. I'd say, you know, don't feel responsible for other people's beliefs. Be only responsible for yourself and what you can do in this world. Because you're right, your life is short. You know, if we're right about this, then, you know, we're not exactly the ones bringing the good news to people when it comes to the afterlife stuff.
I don't know. I kind of think we are.
I mean, in some sense, yeah, it's like, yeah, we get to live our own lives and do the best that we can. But, you know, I don't think my grandma's going to heaven, you know, and that's like, you don't want to bring that up at the funeral, right? It's like
she's going there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, my grandma thinks that I'm going to hell, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's just cruel.
Well, I don't think it's cruel. I don't think that she thinks it in a way, and I'm sorry to pick on Grandma.
Anybody who tells me that my beliefs are going to send me to hell is kind of cruel.
When somebody tells me that they think that I'm going to hell, I don't think that they're telling me, you know, I think you should go to hell. I think that they're telling me that based off of the things that they've been told and the things that they've heard throughout their lives, that's the path that they believe that I've chosen, and they're concerned for me. typically the experience that I have with people
That's
telling
fair
me that.
for them to think. Yeah.
Right, and so I don't blame them for that.
For them to think.
Right,
Yeah.
I just try to give them the opportunity by asking them questions. I try to give them the opportunity of exploring why they think that the way that I did, because when I really started to look down into the nitty-gritty of why I believed these things, then that's what shook my reasoning, because I realized that I didn't actually have a good reason. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm really thankful that I got the chance to do that, and I'm free of that job that you talk about, and it feels really, really good, but I don't necessarily feel like I'm concerned about all of the people that still believe that, because they're on their own path, and they can still get there, and if they choose not to, well, then, I mean, shit happens, you know? And so...
Did you replace it with atheism?
So the thing is, I didn't necessarily replace it.
Right?
So, okay.
You just get rid of the job.
Well,
here's what
so I actually compare religion personally to addiction, in the sense that it's something that I believed that I needed in order to survive, right? So I struggle with addiction. I struggle with alcoholism, and I was a theist. And so just loosely defining it in that way as something that we need to survive.
I can relate.
I had used alcohol to replace it for a little while, and that just took up all of my time, just like religion did before that. And then when I sobered up and I had, less religion and less alcohol, I had, like you say, a lot of extra time. I started replacing it with education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me give my take on this real quick, and then we'll probably have to wrap it up to the next call. But my experience here is I was very much involved in Christianity. I did college ministry. I did church camps, was a camp counselor, even manager at one point. I was very much involved, and my ethic was always to help people. Mm-hmm. I thought that Christianity was the best way for me to help people. And now that I understand that differently, I'm still trying to help people. I'm still doing it in a different way. Mm-hmm. So in one sense, my job is still there, but it's transformed, right? My duties have changed and my work methods have changed, right? Instead of spreading the gospel to people, I'm trying to educate, I'm trying to inform, I'm trying to have healthy conversations, and I'm trying to make people feel welcome in a community where, honestly, hasn't always been welcoming and are used to not being welcomed by their previous community, right? They've kind of getting kicked out and now can come here. So define what that job is going to be for you. Don't think that this is something you just have to completely give up. You're still the same person that you were before. I
don't think I need it anymore, and I don't think I need to replace it with anything.
Well, and that's fine too. You don't have to.
Don't.
You do what you want. Like
you have a blank page.
Life is your oyster, right? Like that's your ethic.
Exactly.
Like for me, it was a transformation. For other people, it might be just giving it up. Who knows?
But the thing is, you also don't have to settle on one thing. You can do one thing for a little while, and then do something else later, and you can change it up and see what works better for you, and try again, because that's life, right?
Yeah. We do have some other calls.
Exactly. It's life. That's my motto, actually. It's life.
It's life.
Yeah, I like
life.
that.
Dan, Truth Wanted, plug it again. Jenna, you're awesome. I hope I don't see this back on YouTube or something.
Oh, you will, but that's okay.
It's very great to talk to you guys.
Thank you for calling, John.
Thank you. And you don't have to ask me to.
If you do.
You don't have to ask me to plug it, by the way. I'll do it anyway, regardless. But It's tough. It's tough leaving. Leaving's the hardest part. I think what holds people back the most is the fear of leaving. I know that held me back a lot.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, because you're told that if you lose your faith, then everything is over and everything is you're a lost cause.
Yeah. And I think I think more people would leave if they had access to communities that could support them through that.
And the thing is that we're the atheist community in general. I mean, even here in Austin, it's still pretty small in the sense of who's out and who feels the need to go and do that. And so we still have to do a little bit more work on building that community.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing here. That's why we're here, and we have so many shows, and we're here every Sunday. We're here every day.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to do, is build that community so that we can show the world that it's not a religious thing. It's a human thing. So we do have 4 more theist callers to get to, and we only have 25 minutes, so we're going to try to keep it a little short. Callers, try to be as succinct as you can be, but we really want to hear what you got to say. So let's go with Jarrod. Has been waiting a while. Jarrod, you are on, and it says here that you believe that there's a possibility of a creator based on science. Is that true?
It is. How y'all doing? Thanks for taking my call.
Good. Thanks
Heck yeah.
for calling. So what do you want to...
So yeah, I'm sorry. I'm a former devout Catholic.
Okay.
I'm a theist in the sense that I believe in a creator due to simulation theory. And I wanted to call and get your take on that.
Simulation theory. I'm not very well versed in simulation theory.
So the different kinds of simulation theory, which one are you in reference to?
I guess someone proposed that like we live in a giant like quantum computer and we're all computer code.
Is
Okay.
that what you think?
Is that your belief?
You know, I'm at the point where I can't not believe it. It's like, what's the difference between like consciousness and self-aware AI?
Okay. So
Oh, that's fun.
So first thing would be why quantum computers specifically is your belief, for everything around us?
I guess, I mean, they quantify, well, not so much a quantum computer. It could be any computer, but with the ability to, I guess, recreate reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading, there was an article in the Washington Post that scientists were able to embed malicious software in human DNA and actually alter it. And I was like, interesting, because it goes back to computer code. So I was wondering if that's a possibility, and what's your take on that?
So possibilities are one thing. Beliefs that this is the truth is another. The reason why the first question I asked you is, why do you believe that? Is because that's the first question I would ask myself. Why would I believe this specific idea about reality over others? Is it possible? Certainly. I mean, I don't know enough about quantum computing. I just know the popular science articles about it, right? I know that we can do some amazing things. And I know that there's this idea that it's almost, there's another idea that there's a statistical likelihood that we're in a computer system right now and our destiny is kind of to create another system, so it's all kind of computer systems way down. I mean, there's different ideas you can play with this. But what it comes down to at the end of the day is I don't have any reason to believe that we're all in a quantum computer more so than we were all the results of, aliens, right? Like, it has to come down to specific evidence that we can kind of look at and compare to justify why one belief should be believed over another. And I don't really have that with quantum computing. Maybe that explanation's out there or maybe some evidence is. I haven't seen it yet. But until I do, it's not something that I particularly hold a lot of stock in compared to anything else.
Very plausible, makes sense. I know they're saying that within like 20 years we'll be able to recreate like reality itself, and we'll be indistinguishable.
Maybe.
Who's saying that?
The modern science consensus. If you look up quantum supremacy, that's all they're talking about is recreating reality in a virtual reality setting. And the human being won't be able to differentiate.
I also thought we were all going to have jetpacks by now, but sometimes predictions with science aren't always, pan out the way that they do. Yeah. Now, that's not saying that it won't happen. We're definitely not claiming that. I don't know that it's not. But I won't hold, it's just something we got to wait on, especially with predictions in science. Predictions in science are very, very iffy. If you don't believe me, you can look up some of these old documentaries on like the world of the future and stuff and all these kinds of predictions that we would have. Some of them did come true. Cell phones are pretty amazing, right? These kinds of telecommunications technologies, self-driving cars, that's a thing that we have now. We're about to have like a lot more sex robots and stuff. That's definitely a thing that people have been looking forward to. Some of these stuff pans through, but until it happens, it's hard for me to say either way whether or not that means anything for the reality we live in now. So,
is this a belief that determines? Sorry,
what's up, Jarrod? Jarrod?
No, I was saying a real quick question that if it ever came down to the fact that they proved that we were actually inside of like a quantum mainframe, would that then, I guess, prove a creator or creators?
Good question. I guess
progenitors.
How would that prove any kind of creator?
Well, so he's saying if we discovered that we were the result of a computer program or something, would that imply a creator? I'd say maybe so. Yeah, that'd be pretty. Okay. I don't know how we would get to that point.
Yeah.
But if we found that we were part of some sort of code, maybe. Yeah. But we do have some other calls here. I think we kind of wrap this one up pretty quick here. Thanks for calling on this one.
Okay. Hey, thanks for taking the call.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks. Nice talking to you, Jarrod.
Hey, love you guys. Take care.
You too.
Love you too.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
Let's talk to Dean.
Shit, it's Dean from North Carolina.
Hi,
my
Dean.
theist caller on Truth Wanted that also donates to the Patreon, which you should too. That's patreon.com/truthwanted. Dean, how's it going, bud?
What's going on, guys?
Good.
I was hoping we'd have jetpacks by now, too.
Oh man, yeah, and hoverboards
Just
and
saying.
hover skateboards like in Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Mm-hmm.
So, real quick, when Kenny called, he talked about dark energy and all that stuff, and he talked about the beginning of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys accept the standard model of the Big Bang as the most likely depiction of how the universe began to exist?
I do.
Well, so tricky because the Big Bang model that we know, it doesn't actually describe like the beginning part. It's more in description of the everything after.
Right. It's
Right.
I accept it as something that happened.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a common misnomer that it's a description of like how everything first began, quote unquote. It describes like the things that we know back as far as we can understand,
Right,
like
this is
time.
us rewinding
right?
time.
Yeah, but it's not the same as like it's like we can rewind the cassette tape, but we don't actually know like how the cassette tape got put in.
Or what it looks like.
Yeah,
external-
like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's more akin to that.
So you don't think it's like the beginning point of the reality that we currently understand?
The Big Bang describes our understanding of reality up into a certain point. And that point, we don't know
what
much
happened
about.
before that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Or if there was something before that, we don't know.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to say I do.
So, and this is probably a little bit more controversial than we maybe let on. So, Board Youth for Lincoln theorem back in 2003 they basically said that any model of the universe that's made that has, or any universe that has expanded throughout its history has to have a beginning. And so my question is, do you think, based upon that the universe that we know of has a definite beginning at a finite point in time? Or do you think that it would be eternal?
Do I think that based on a quote from someone who's telling me on a call-in show about what some guy said a few decades ago? No. Is it possible? Sure. But I can't verify just based on, this conversation here. And I understand that's not on you, Dean. That's a limit of the medium that we're doing here. But I don't know beyond, what we can talk about here.
I also don't use definite in my vocabulary very much anymore, because even if I did accept that as, as that's the most likely thing, I'll go with that. Like the Big Bang, I'll go with that. I've heard the explanations. I believe that that's what happened. But would that mean other things? That's a different thing. And also, do I think that it's definite to the point where I would put other things on top of that? I don't know. I don't. It would depend. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes. I see what you're saying. And Dan, the book from the Lincoln is Many Worlds in One. Just to let you know.
Cool.
That's where he has that quote. So you don't say it's just from me from a call.
No, dude. I'm not saying it doesn't exist or that you're making it up. It's just I can't really, I don't know enough background context to make a judgment call.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because here's my point. I guess my question is, if there's sufficient evidence, for a beginning point of the universe in a finite point in the past in which the universe began, the question becomes then, what's the best explanation for that? Either the universe does have a definite beginning at a finite point in the past, or it's eternal. And I think how we view the universe and its existence, indicates to us, or could possibly indicate to us, either the strengthening of the theist position or the weakening of the theist position. Does that make sense?
I don't know that the concession that the universe had a finite point really lends more credence to theism than to atheism, because that's just one specific, just because the universe had a beginning doesn't mean much for for anybody, I think. I mean, that's something that Christianity claims, but like that's what a lot of people claim. Like that's a pretty common idea amongst even religious and scientific people, obviously, who are apparently also making this claim. I wouldn't say that it lends too much to anything.
Have you seen The Grinch?
Have I seen the Grinch? Which version of the Grinch?
Yeah, we
The
talking
Jim Carrey one.
Okay, he's talking Jim Carrey.
Or, well, I mean, the cartoon one, they do it too. But at the very beginning of The Grinch, what they do is they kind of zoom in on a snowstorm, and then they zoom in on a snowflake, and then they zoom in more on the snowflake, and they zoom in more on the snowflake, and then you see this little town of Whoville, and then you zoom in more, and you see these little people, right? And so it's kind of like this quantum world in The Grinch, right? And so is it possible that our universe is equivalent to that snowflake that's just existing and it's falling and there's other things out there? And would that mean that there's a God? I don't know that would mean that there's a God. Does it also, is it possible that doesn't exist and that this is all there is? I mean, maybe, but I don't see how, if it is eternal or if it isn't, I don't see how any of that would get me any closer to a God.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying there. I agree with Dan that, with regards to the finite beginning of the universe, I agree that both atheists and theists can hold that position, but I think that it would make the case stronger for theism in this sense, that if the universe is eternal, and it just has always been around, then you don't need an eternal God to create an eternal universe. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. So in the sense that if the universe was eternal, could there, unless there's something outside of eternity, which at this point, I mean, we're just talking metaphysics here. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't. Yeah. I get what you're saying. You're saying that if there's a beginning, if there's a God that's eternal, then that being outside of the beginning could make the beginning.
Yeah.
But if he's eternal, then that would mean that there really is no beginning, or at least beginning is just kind of an arbitrary point based on, I don't know, because that still implies time itself. It's a whole thing. Like, I don't know. like I said, I mean, we could get into the nitty gritty of it, but either way, like, I mean, maybe it does concede a little bit to like this idea that there's, I don't think it does, but like regardless, it doesn't really mean much to me. Like we could talk about the could be's and would be's and should be's of an eternal God and what that would mean if there exists, but like it doesn't really move the board for, I don't think for me, for you either, but like it doesn't really shake things up, Until I see that eternal being, or see like an existence of what could only be done by an eternal being, then yeah, maybe so.
Well, the only way that you could know that that's something that only an eternal being could do is if you could show that another example of it that an eternal being couldn't do.
Yeah, and that's, unless there's multiple eternal beings. I don't even know. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess another question I have would be then, if you have a situation where, time, space, matter come into existence at a finite point in the past, then would we say then, like, the universe just kind of, if it's not a timeless, spaceless, immaterial being, then would we just say that the universe just created itself?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so, but I don't know. You see what I mean, Dean? It doesn't really move us anywhere. Like, the question of whether or not, this is a possibility is interesting, but it wouldn't really, it doesn't really move the board.
Even if you could say, I don't know, you couldn't say that, so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's one of my points. Like, why wouldn't that move you if the universe can't create itself and it began to exist at a finite point in the past?
But I don't know how you could prove that it can't create itself, first of all, like in the first place.
Well, you would have to show that something could come from nothing.
How could you do that?
I don't know about that. There's some language there that I might not agree with there, Dean.
What?
I don't know. Well, if we're talking about nothing, right? Because there's a God and there's something, and then he can't be. Well, I don't know. It can't be. See, like, you know what I think, Dean? I think this is a great conversation to have on another show called Truth Wanted, which happens at 7 p.m. Central Time on Friday nights. Go check that out if
Well,
you haven't
I'll-
already. Maybe you and I can discuss it a bit
Friday.
further on that show. What do you think, Dean?
Friday.
All right.
Okay,
I like
cool.
to plug. I like to plug.
Nice talking to you, Dean. I have you on Facebook, and I love the conversations. You're doing great.
Hey, no problem, Jenna. Hey, take care.
You too. Thanks.
All right.
All right. Well, one of the theists, I think, ran away. So we've got one left. Connor, it says here that when folks believe that they've been lied to by a religion, they should reconsider it. Can you back that?
No, that's it.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
oh, no, he
No, I
ended-
think that was a mistake.
Yeah, I think he accidentally hung up on himself there.
Well,
We Connor
we could
will,
wait a second.
Connor will give you a second to call
Give
back.
you like 30 seconds. Hey, Dan, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine.
What are you doing on Friday?
Well, great question. I'm so glad you asked. I'm not going to do it again. That's just too annoying at this point.
It looks like we might have had him call back.
Okay, let's see. They're getting him on the handset here, and we're just gonna wait. This is the waiting song.
Nope. Okay,
Oh,
nope,
he's
that's
gone.
it.
Oh,
I think we've got dinner somewhere
Yeah, we have dinner here
in the back.
in the studio. If you're joining us live here tonight,
And thank y'all so much for watching.
Jenna,
And
where can people find the Atheist Experience at? If
Online?
they're online, can they find it on YouTube?
well, I hope they're watching.
Can they find it
YouTube
on
right
Spotify?
now.
They can find it on a bunch of different places,
And
right?
you can find it all in the list down below.
Yeah, links in the description as well.
And also, we're on Discord.
We are on Discord, and hey, they're trying to call back here. Let's see if we can get talking to them.
Well, we don't know yet if that's
Maybe we don't know they're going to talk, but I'm doing this thing right now on Truth One where I'm talking to people after the show on Discord, so you can hang out with me
that's
there
cool.
as well. That's pretty cool. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter at they're ending the call again. Okay, I think
Yeah.
we should probably just kind of wrap things up here for tonight. I'm ObjectivelyDan. You can find me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan. And I host Truth Wanted, as we talked about a million times here. So please go check that out if you haven't already. It's similar to the Atheist Experience. It is a call-in show, but we go outside of our way to talk about other stuff. We talked about flat Earth, Bigfoot, chemtrails one time, all kinds of stuff. And religion gets talked about too. I have a new guest every single week, usually somebody I find online. And so that's really cool. Sometimes they have in-studio guests as well. So you should definitely check it out if you haven't already.
A show.
Yeah. And anything else you want to say before we...
Nope. Thanks for watching.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.